Upon seeing Yuzniel entering, Lily's father hurriedly approached with an excited demeanor and grabbed Yuzniel's hand, exclaiming, "Oh, my princess." This took Duke Milan, standing nearby, by surprise. "What are you doing, my lord chamberlain?" Yuzniel quickly realized he was Duke Hanem. The Duke looked at her sincerely and implored, "Please, your highness, help me." Yuzniel was bewildered, unaware of the situation, but knowing the history of animosity between the two families, she wondered silently, could he be here to cause trouble again? Turning to her father, she asked, "Father, what's going on?" The chamberlain knelt down, grasping the hem of Yuzniel's garment, and earnestly pleaded, "Please, save my daughter Lily." These words filled Yuzniel with anxiety. The chamberlain urgently continued, recounting how Lily had been imprisoned in the royal dungeon for several days without any news of her well-being, fearing she might perish. Yuzniel, hearing the heartfelt plea from the chamberlain, thought, how could she die? Yuzniel's father quickly pulled the chamberlain to his feet. "How dare you behave so rudely?" he exclaimed. Yuzniel, equally coldly, brushed the chamberlain's hand away, saying, "I have no reason to do otherwise. It was Lily Sunni who offended my family and ended up imprisoned. I am merely the victim here, unable to act differently in the face of the emperor's punishment." She then challenged the chamberlain to maintain decorum and respect. "Do you even understand that?" The chamberlain, desperate to save his daughter, complied with whatever Yuzniel said. He nodded fervently, admitting his mistake and begging Yuzniel to save Lily. "Even if Lily has erred," he pleaded, "it is not a crime deserving of death." Yuzniel felt a headache coming on, finding it perplexing why the chamberlain kept mentioning death without considering other options. However, she reasoned that even if Lily were imprisoned by the emperor, he wouldn't have reason to kill her, as the noble alliance would surely oppose such an act. Then Yuzniel's father interjected, "There's no longer any noble alliance, because the emperor has already purged more than half of them." This revelation startled Yuzniel, reminding her of Athar's warning, if the emperor ascends the throne, the palace will be a place of turmoil. "So, I advise you to steer clear of him, Yuzniel." Recalling this, Yuzniel felt a sudden sense of alarm. What might have happened in the palace while her family was away? How had the landscape changed? After a tumultuous night, Duke Sunni finally returned, bringing peace back to their home. Both father and daughter breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that the Duke's son remained sober-minded. Otherwise, they would have had no choice but to summon the guards. Reflecting on this, Yuzniel felt fortunate for the presence of the Duke's son, as things could have taken a turn for the worse. Once Nod arrived at Yuzniel's home, he promptly escorted his father back. "Let's return home today, father," he said. The chamberlain, walking slowly, asked his son Nud, "Don't you see Lily's pitiful condition?" Nud, feeling powerless, pleaded with his father, "Please, father, listen to me." Both the Duke and Yuzniel, who were following behind, heard Nud's words. Eventually, Nud managed to get his father into the carriage and apologized on his behalf for the impoliteness. Nud then turned to Yuzniel, his expression serious. "I will surely keep my promise and return to find the princess," he declared. With a respectful bow, Nud bid farewell to Yuzniel and asked permission to take his father home. Yuzniel felt that Nud resembled Eugene, their personalities were both calm, in stark contrast to the chamberlain. However, she didn't forget about the important matter her father had mentioned earlier. She quickly asked her father about it. "Father, what did you mean earlier by no more noble alliance? Can you please explain it to me? And what about the purge?" Duke Sunni didn't know where to start. He rested his chin on his hand and recounted, "During our time in Varan, there was a plot within the palace by some noble factions to overthrow the crown prince. However, after the sudden death of Duke Janta, the leader of the rebellious faction, and the loyalty of the royal knights, who swore to protect the crown prince, everything dissipated into oblivion." Yuzniel listened intently, her expression serious. "So, those factions disappeared? Does this mean that Tess handled them all upon his ascension?" The Duke nodded. During that tumultuous period, the emperor revealed all the secrets of the noble families involved, and their lands and wealth were confiscated by the state. It's said that our family's exile during that time was fortunate, as we weren't implicated in the affair. "Do you notice," continued Duke Sunni, "that since our return to the capital, the palace has been quieter, but the atmosphere remains tense?" Concerned, he advised Yuzniel, "So, be careful, Yuzniel." Yuzniel, feeling a bit anxious, subconsciously clutched her skirt, trying to appear calm so as not to worry her father. Yes, I'll be cautious, father, she assured him, leaving that matter aside for the moment. The next morning, Yuzniel decided to go to the palace to find Tespelin. However, upon arrival, she was informed by the steward that the emperor was in a meeting, so she would have to wait for a while. Yuzniel nodded in understanding, knowing that the steward would inform her when it was time. She found a seat and waited. Despite trying to maintain a calm demeanor, Yuzniel couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. She had initially planned to stay away from the palace for a while, but after hearing about the plot against the crown prince, she couldn't help but worry about Tespelin. Hence, she decided to come here. In Yuzniel's eyes, Tespelin was like a rose with thorns, making everyone believe the emperor was a tyrant, dangerous, but they didn't know Tespelin's true nature, which was why they spoke that way. In this passage, there are some inconsistencies in the pronouns used for Yuzniel, alternating between he and she. Here's the corrected version. By the way, Yuzniel came here to deal with Lily Suni's matter, thinking she needed to see for herself if Tespelin was truly okay. Lost in thought, suddenly, the sound of footsteps descended the stairs, calling out, Yuzniel. Hearing the call, Yuzniel turned immediately to Tespelin. He smiled gently at her, as if asking, did I not say you would come to meet me? Slowly descending the stairs and approaching Yuzniel, Tespelin spoke cheerfully, I said you would come to meet me. Seeing Tespelin appearing in all her regal and dignified demeanor in the magnificent castle, Yuzniel felt both strange and overwhelmed, she was so handsome. They began conversing, and Yuzniel quickly asked about Lily. What about Lily's case? Does it really warrant such punishment? Tespelin's voice was firm, she dared to offend you, so I did what was necessary. Furthermore, now she's causing you worry, so I'm even less inclined to spare her. Yuzniel shook her head, explaining, it's not that I'm worried, it's just that she's your friend's sister, so I'm concerned. Besides, I also saw this as an opportunity to repay the debt to Duke Suni. Tespelin mused for a moment, then calmly made her request, then kiss me. Surprised by the unexpected proposal, Yuzniel met Tespelin's gaze, her eyes tempting, if you do, I'll spare her. As she finished speaking, Tespelin touched Yuzniel's shoulder and leaned close to her ear. She whispered softly to Yuzniel, kiss me, Yuzniel. As she spoke, she lightly stroked Yuzniel's shoulder. Yuzniel couldn't see Tespelin's face clearly at that moment, it seemed a bit strange to her. Yuzniel stood silently without responding, hesitating at this request. The atmosphere between them grew tense, as their lips were about to touch in that harmonious scene. Just as they were getting intimate, Tespelin's laughter echoed, ha ha. At that moment, Yuzniel covered Tespelin's mouth with her hand. Tespelin whispered softly, what a pity. Their gazes met, and Yuzniel's cheeks flushed red. Tespelin's regretful voice spoke out, I thought this time you would kiss for real. Hearing those words, Yuzniel's face grew even redder, and she stammered, what, me? Well, it's not a big deal anyway. The main character playfully licked her lips and gently caressed Yuzniel's soft hands. Just like this, I feel satisfied enough, she said. Yuzniel quickly stopped Tespelin's actions, saying, I never expected you to have such tricks up your sleeve. Yuzniel was so embarrassed that she didn't know what to say. She knew she had to take action. Using a few moves, she made Tespelin cry out, ouch. What are you doing, Yuzniel? Yuzniel coldly instructed, stay away. Stay away. Tespelin rubbed her head in frustration, saying, ouch, that hurts, Yuzniel. Yuzniel brushed off her clothes angrily, saying, why did I even bother talking to you? You're so annoying. If you don't feel any pain, then why bother fighting back? Tespelin then put on a pitiful look and asked, why are you angry? If you don't like what I'm asking for, I'll spare Suni. Yuzniel turned and walked away in frustration, saying, whether to spare her or not is up to you. Seeing Yuzniel leaving without looking back, Tespelin called after her, but Yuzniel didn't respond. As she walked away, Yuzniel placed her hand over her heart, trying to calm herself down. I almost kissed Tespelin just now, she thought to herself, her face turning red again. She scolded herself, you're crazy, Yuzniel. Tespelin followed behind her, constantly trying to soothe her, don't be angry anymore. Tespelin spoke solemnly, I was wrong, please forgive me. Yuzniel kept reminding herself about the other person, it's Tespelin, the boy who used to be so timid and always clung to me like a piece of gum because of his frail body. I've always taken care of him, always like that, a childhood friend. Yuzniel reminded herself that Tespelin was like her younger brother, indeed. But now Tespelin approached her again, asking in a soft voice, "Are you still angry with me now?" What made Yuzniel anxious was the racing heartbeat she felt. "Why is my heart beating so fast?" Eventually, Yuzniel left the palace and got on the horse carriage to return home. Sitting in the carriage, she sighed in relief, feeling a bit relaxed. In that moment, Yuzniel thought her heart was about to explode, but luckily, she used all the patience from her past lives to escape the palace, pretending as if nothing had happened. Yuzniel thought of Tespelin's demeanor. "If that boy finds out I'm wavering, he'll probably set a wedding date right away because Tespelin always wants to marry me." After thinking it over, Yuzniel felt a bit uneasy. She realized she might prefer Tespelin in white, rather than those black outfits. Yuzniel suddenly noticed something unusual about herself. "What am I thinking?" "Pull yourself together, Yuzniel," she scolded herself, burying her face in her hands with embarrassment. She knew she shouldn't be like this. "But I can't push Tespelin away. What should I do now?" Yuzniel couldn't help but think about Tespelin's sweet gestures and affectionate actions towards her. The beautiful face was one thing, but even the scent made Yuzniel's mind foggy. The subtle, intimate gestures were enchanting her. "Please kiss me, Yuzniel." Every time Yuzniel made eye contact with Tespelin, she couldn't resist. Yuzniel gently touched her lips, feeling her body temperature rise as she looked at Tespelin's tall, mature figure. Yuzniel realized that Tespelin had changed a lot because of her, and she had lost a lot because of that too. Yuzniel sighed and leaned her chin on her hand, looking truly sad. "Even if I try to push him away, his thoughts remain the same. Maybe he really has me under his spell." Yuzniel closed her eyes and sighed deeply. "I'm thinking too much. I don't want to think about this anymore. What I need to focus on is finding a way back to the old world as soon as possible. But can I really ignore him, someone who has suffered for 14 years and now acts as if nothing happened?" Lost in these thoughts for a while, Yuzniel finally arrived home. Servants helped Yuzniel out of the carriage. "Miss, you're home," they said softly. Yuzniel replied quietly, "Yes, there's nothing to worry about." Servants wanted to speak with Yuzniel, informing her that there was a visitor waiting in the garden. It turned out to be Nud, the son of the Sunni household steward. Nud had been waiting for Yuzniel for quite some time, and upon her return, he greeted her warmly as Princess Hardlard. Yuzniel was a bit surprised, saying, "I heard from the steward that someone from the Sunni family was waiting in the garden. I thought it might be Eugene coming to visit, but I didn't expect it to be you. Sorry for making you wait." Nud smiled and waved his hand dismissively, saying, "It's okay. I came here for a specific reason." Yuzniel teased, "So this time, did you know how to write a letter requesting a visit in advance?" "Because last time I thought you didn't know how to write, so my family didn't receive any letters." This remark made Nud a bit embarrassed, but he smiled and replied, "Yuzniel, don't say that. I'm here to apologize." Nud then bowed respectfully and apologized for his father and Lily's rudeness towards Yuzniel. Yuzniel was surprised by this sincere gesture and told Nud to stand up. Despite Nud's remorseful expression, Yuzniel waved his hand casually and said, "Young master, there's no need to apologize." Yuzniel was taken aback by Nud's act of humility, realizing that he was different from the Earl and Lily. As they continued their conversation, Nud explained that it was natural for him to apologize, as his family had made mistakes, and as the next in line, he had to take responsibility for those mistakes. Yuzniel found it intriguing why Nud's younger sister, Lily, had such a different personality from him and his sister, Eugene. Nud explained that their family had been trying to produce a queen since Lily was very young, but it hadn't worked out. Lily was born to be the queen instead of Eugene, and unlike his sister, she cared deeply about her position as the queen. Yuzniel listened to Nud's explanation, feeling somewhat puzzled. "Why would she be worried?" she asked. Nud looked into Yuzniel's eyes and replied, "Because the princess has a close relationship with His Majesty, so my sister was afraid." Yuzniel awkwardly responded, "What? What do people think? We don't have that kind of relationship." Nud was surprised by this answer and asked, "Not at all?" Yuzniel blushed and explained, "His Majesty and I are just friends, not like what people say." "Then that's good," Nud said, somewhat unexpectedly, leaving Yuzniel slightly startled, fearing she might have misheard. Yuzniel asked, "What did you just say?" Nud, feeling embarrassed, changed the subject and apologized for Lily's actions. Yuzniel smiled and accepted Nud's apology, reassuring him that Lily would be fine. Nud gazed at Yuzniel with a strange admiration, remarking that the princess was still as honorable and upright as he had always respected. Yuzniel chuckled, crossing her arms. Are you mocking me with that last remark? What's with all the respect? Nud earnestly replied, I meant what I said sincerely. That's why I want to show my respect to the princess. Yuzniel looked surprised. Respect? How? Nud gently extended his hand towards Yuzniel and said, I've heard that the princess has received many invitations to parties and gatherings lately. So, could I be the lucky one to accompany her? Yuzniel was taken aback by this unexpected request, remaining silent for a moment. Nud continued with a smile, during your absence, the rules of high society have changed a lot, and almost all schedules have companions to attend those events. Moreover, as the next Earl, I know more about the trends of the capital than anyone else. Hearing Nud's words, Yuzniel fell into silent contemplation. It's definitely important to grasp the flow of high society when accompanying Lord Sunni. Having him as a companion will make gathering information much easier, she thought to herself. Yuzniel nodded in agreement with the proposal. All right then, she said. Turning away, Yuzniel left Nud feeling somewhat disappointed. She slowly spoke up, I'll arrange a date for the gathering and inform Lord Sunni. Thank you for your kind offer, Lord Sunni. Nud's expression was unreadable, but he seemed resigned as he said, next time we meet, I hope you'll call my name, even just once. Standing under the refreshing spring breeze, Nud smiled and added, please feel free to treat me casually, Your Highness. After a few days had passed, the party day finally arrived. We shifted scenes to the grand mansion of the Harland family. In a neatly tidy yet opulent room befitting the grandeur of the family, Yuzniel was getting ready and trying on dresses for the party. Her younger sister timidly approached from behind and asked, Are you ready yet? Her sister hurriedly urged her, the Sunni carriage is already here waiting outside. Gale couldn't contain her emotions at the sight of her beautiful sister before her and exclaimed, Oh my, Yuzniel, you look stunning. I can't believe my eyes. I also can't wait to attend the upper-class party. Yuzniel gently patted her sister's head and sighed, showing the wisdom of experience as she said, You're still young, it's better if you don't go. It's quite a bother. Her sister smiled and reminded her, Right, your companion is waiting outside. Yuzniel went to peek through the door crack and saw Mr. Sunni standing elegantly beside the luxurious horse-drawn carriage. Her sister, full of admiration, continued, The more I look, the more handsome he appears. His demeanor today is truly refined. At that moment, Mr. Sunni raised his head and caught Yuzniel's gaze. Perhaps because she was too beautiful, his face blushed slightly. He smiled at Yuzniel. However, she sighed, remembering Nud's words from the previous day, I hope next time we meet, you'll call me by my name, Mississippi. She worriedly wondered if Mr. Sunni might have some ulterior motives. Following that, Yuzniel quickly descended to the courtyard in front of the castle. They both stepped onto the horse-drawn carriage and departed. Sitting across from each other on 2 rows of seats, Mr. Sunni inquired of Yuzniel, Have you been well since that day? Yuzniel politely nodded, Yes, I have been well. Mr. Sunni continued, I heard that you recently received an offer to participate in the new magical project, by Calcium. Is that correct? It's usually difficult for someone who isn't a professor to understand magic, so you're truly outstanding to have taken on that project, Mississippi. Upon hearing this, Yuzniel's expression became slightly guarded. How did he know about my recent situation? Mr. Sunni, in response to Yuzniel's question, hesitated for a moment, then finally voiced his concern, Why don't you address me by my name? Yuzniel shook her head calmly and said, Because we're not that close. In that moment, with Yuzniel's sharp gaze, she silently pondered that perhaps he didn't realize that when a man and a woman aren't friends and call each other by their names, it might be misunderstood as an intimate relationship. Yuzniel then coolly continued, Or is it that when we're not present, calling each other by name signifies a family enmity? Mr. Sunni, hearing this, was immediately taken aback. A few seconds later, Yuzniel heard a mocking tone from across, followed by Mr. Sunni's laughter gradually rising amidst her suspicion. Why is he laughing? Mr. Sunni looked up, still chuckling, and said, Nothing has changed, but... He placed his hand on his chest with a melancholic expression, You still treat me with such disdain, princess. Yuzniel asked coldly, When have I ever treated you with disdain? Mr. Sunni chuckled lightly, Because you never let me address you by your name before. It turns out that when they were young, Mr. Sunni once tried to approach Yuzniel and ask for permission. The young boy hesitated. Miss Harland, I also want to be like Lord Ather and address you by your name. May I? Yusniel turned her head and disagreed, saying that our families were not familiar with each other, so she had to decline. At this mention, Mr. Sunni showed a resentful expression. You said that, but you still became friends with my sister, Eugene. Yusniel just remained silent, pondering to herself, did I really say that? I don't remember anything. Mr. Sunni placed his hand on his chest, revealing a sincere expression, so our family relationship isn't a problem, right? Therefore, please consider me as your friend's brother. The words Mr. Sunni spoke made Yusniel feel a bit awkward. Unconsciously, she tightened the fan in her hand. Seeing her silence, Mr. Sunni suspiciously asked, or is there something else bothering the princess? Yusniel turned her head and said, if you're considered a friend's brother, then there's no harm in calling each other by name. Although Yusniel didn't understand why Mr. Sunni was fixated on being addressed by name like that. If that's the case, Mr. Sunni seized the opportunity to ask again, can I also call you by your name? Helpless against his insistence, Yusniel could only sigh and compromise, it's up to you. While they conversed, the carriage swiftly brought them to the upper-class party, where everyone had already gathered in great numbers, dressed splendidly, especially accompanied by their companions. Among the crowd stood Eugene and Ather. Seeing them there, Yusniel went to greet them, very surprised. Are you two companions with each other? Yusniel asked, since when did you have this relationship? Eugene and Ather were stunned and startled, what relationship? Ather frowned at Yusniel, blaming her, wasn't it you who said you'd be companions with Mr. Sunni? That's why I had no choice, but to accompany Miss Eugene. Eugene refused to back down and used her fan to hit Ather before arguing back, I helped him because he didn't have a companion. Eugene quickly shifted to another topic and asked Yusniel, but Yusniel, I thought you wouldn't come to this party? Yusniel chuckled softly, can't I be a bit trendy in this upper-class society? Just when I received the offer, to be a companion, from new. Mr. Sunni then happily said, thank you for agreeing, Yusniel. Both Ather and Eugene were very surprised to hear Mr. Sunni use Yusniel's real name. Even Yusniel herself was equally surprised, he called me by my nickname straight away? Although she knew it wasn't a big deal, Yusniel still felt a bit uncomfortable, feeling awkward looking at him. Ather stood on the other side, feeling very jealous, what's going on? Are you two so close that you use intimate names now? The argument between the two men officially began. Mr. Sunni started by asking, isn't Lord Ather also calling you like that? Ather immediately frowned, but I'm not like Mr. Sunni. Yusniel stood before the heated argument between the two men, feeling truly awkward. Seeing Yusniel frustrated, Eugene pulled her away, whispering softly, let them fight. Let's go talk privately for a moment. Then the two girls found a private corner to talk. Yusniel said, thank you, Eugene. Thanks to you, I can breathe a little, it's really overwhelming over there. Eugene then happily told her, Yusniel, do you know? Lily has been released and only fined. I should thank you for that. At that time, His Majesty released the hostage back home with the condition that Tich Thursday takes control of the southern territory of the Sunni family. Yusniel was horrified to hear this, the southern territory? Isn't that where the diamond mines are located, the main source of income for the Sunni family? Tespalin's actions are like cutting off the family's largest source of income. Eugene chuckled softly and shook her head, if you don't care too much about it, then it's okay. It's still better than her dying. Yusniel glanced thoughtfully, I thought Tespalin would just release Lily, but unexpectedly, there are conditions attached. Moreover, the conditions are not small at all. So, by relying on this, he weakened the power of the Sunni family, while also helping to fill the royal coffers legally. Tespalin is really clever. It turns out that everything he does has a purpose, all aimed at strengthening the monarchy. Yusniel couldn't help but exclaim, that little brat is really good at using his brain. Eugene disagreed upon hearing this, Yusniel, what are you saying? His Majesty is no longer the small prince you remember. In this palace, no matter how insignificant the corruption is, he always finds the person behind it, everything. And there are no repercussions. But it's truly miraculous that my family hasn't disappeared. Yusniel closed her eyes tightly, softly smiling as if she had relieved her worries, it seems he's doing the main job better than I thought. I worried in vain. Eugene smiled in response, 14 years isn't a short time. The two girls were deeply engrossed in conversation, but Yusniel turned her attention to the other side, curious when she saw Lord Sunny and his friend Arthur surrounded by people, discussing important matters. For instance, Lord Sunny, I have something to say regarding taxes and the regulations surrounding them, one person said, while another remarked, isn't Lord Arthur a promising candidate for the position of captain of the cavalry? Yusniel realized everyone has grown much more mature than in childhood. I also had to try much harder back then. The party quickly came to an end, and Yusniel returned home late at night. She announced to the family, I'm back. After collapsing tiredly onto a chair, her mother quickly asked, did you enjoy the party today? Her younger sister sitting beside her also wondered, what are the upper-class people like? In contrast to her family's enthusiasm, Yusniel propped her chin up with her hand, feeling exhausted. She replied, furrowing her brows, don't say anything. Everyone surrounded me like I was about to die. But anyway, this was my first time attending an upper-class event, so I consider it a success. Yusniel's mother raised her teacup to take a sip and continued, so, Yusniel, between Arthur and Nud, who do you like more? Hearing this, Yusniel looked surprised. Isn't there some misunderstanding? Her mother continued, if it's too difficult to choose, then I approve of you meeting both. As her mother finished speaking, a beautifully decorated piece of cake fell from somewhere and scattered all over the table. Her father, who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, held the cake in his shaky hands, looking at the family and asking, is our daughter in a relationship? At that moment, he couldn't hold back his tears from the shock. And with two young men? Yusniel quickly explained with a serious expression, you've misunderstood. Yusniel's mother found the situation amusing and teased her, Yusniel, when you get married, you can only choose one person, you know. Seeing her father approaching a stroke, Yusniel painfully urged her mother, Mom, stop it. Continuing the storyline, returning to the life of the upper class acted as a catalyst for Yusniel to become busier than ever. At this moment, inside a large meeting room, Yusniel stood confidently on a podium, delivering the results of her research to everyone. With this formula, the magic index is not accurate. Let's see what I've calculated. The people seated below, all highly educated individuals, nodded in agreement with Yusniel's opinions. Additionally, Yusniel participated in a magical power research project conducted by Colosseum last weekend. Due to her involvement in the upper-class gatherings alongside Nud, all the attention regarding Yusniel's relationship with Tess gradually disappeared, overshadowed by Lily Sunni's actions. Yusniel was currently feeling extremely overwhelmed by the stack of magical documents on her desk that she needed to research. When will I ever finish this? It seems endless. Yusniel suddenly remembered, placing a hand on her forehead, I've been so busy that I couldn't even meet Tespelin. I've been staying here for too long. She stayed back at the laboratory every night because she didn't want to waste time commuting back home. Yeah, Tespelin hasn't contacted me separately either, so he must be busy. Being a monarch, there are many tasks to handle, Yusniel thought as she found a seat and sighed heavily. She fell into a state of despair, thinking, the current research I'm conducting is only necessary to return to the original world. Yusniel glanced out the window, reminding herself once again that the opportunity to find a way back had come, so she shouldn't be distracted and should focus. Looking outside, all the trees and plants had become bare. Yusniel was sure that this year was coming to an end. Winter was almost over, and another year had passed. It was time to prepare for the New Year's party. Looking at her messy room filled with scattered clothes and accessories, Yusniel sighed with frustration, oh dear, I'm so busy. Endless obligations leave me with no free time. Now, I need to adjust my schedule, try on dresses, and attend the event because the New Year's ball is already here. Seeing Yusniel's frustration, her younger sister became curious and asked, do you always have to prepare for the ball at the New Year's party? This being her first time witnessing it, Gale seemed quite interested. Yusniel patiently explained the origin of the festival to her sister. Since ancient times, the winters in the Northern Empire have been very cold, resulting in many deaths. Therefore, there were no festivities at the end of the year. Over time, they developed the tradition of celebrating the new year fervently as a memorial to the deceased monarch, distributing relief supplies to the people such as oil, grains, and other items. They would hold the dance of the new year for several days in the palace. Do you see the thing next to you? That's the invitation. Gale stared at it intently and then exclaimed excitedly, so the opening ceremony is on your birthday. Yusniel sighed, not particularly pleased with this revelation. That's why I'm never satisfied because on my birthday, I just want to rest and be quiet. Yuzniel watched as her younger sister focused on reading the lines of the invitation, then spoke up, your birthday dinner with the family every year, but this year, it probably won't happen. But you're not old enough to attend the ball yet, you know. Yuzniel said with a hint of surprise, as her sister covered her face with the invitation and looked sad. The younger girl sighed, the capital is magnificent, so I'm really excited, but it's still strange, because no one is taking me to see it. You and Dad are busy, so it's hard to meet up, and the servants are too many to remember all their names. Besides, the rooms are too big. Yuzniel was slightly taken aback by how her sister harbored so many feelings while being busy with her own affairs. Seeing Gale like this, Yuzniel gently approached to comfort her, Gale, because you're not used to the life of a princess yet, that's why. As Gale covered her face again, Yuzniel continued softly, this is something you should enjoy, so you'll adapt quickly, no problem. Her little sister's face looked adorable as she received attention from her older sister. You'll help me, won't you? Yuzniel looked at her with a smile, and Gale nodded happily, yes, I will. With her younger sister back to her cheerful self, she suggested, that's great then. I'll help you choose a dress for the New Year's ball. Yuzniel also happily agreed, saying, sure thing, thanks a lot. Her younger sister went to Yuzniel's wardrobe, pondering for a moment. She murmured, so many options, I don't know which one to choose. Then, suddenly, she brightened up and asked, what about that red gemstone you wear? Yuzniel was slightly taken aback by the mention of the gemstone, but her sister continued, remember? The red gemstone you received on your 18th birthday? You treasure it, don't you? That gemstone was indeed special, sparkling with a brilliant red hue, carefully kept by Yuzniel in a box. Holding it in her hand, Yuzniel smiled and asked her sister, you mean this one? Her sister nodded vigorously, yes, that's the one. It always looks so big and beautiful. Didn't you receive it from your friend? Yuzniel smiled nostalgically, I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like it. Her sister then rushed off to find a suitable dress for her. The room fell silent, with only Yuzniel there, holding the precious gemstone. The cold winter wind outside tapped against the window, creating a poetic scene. In that moment, Yuzniel reminisced about the past. It was snowing the day I received this, she recalled. I was 18 years old, still exiled to the outskirts. In a humble house, I often practiced swordsmanship. I remember lying down in exhaustion and telling my sword master, I need a break, I'm so tired. Seeing her like that, the sword master teased, Yuzniel, tired already? You haven't won a single match this whole year? Yuzniel retorted, isn't it because you have no conscience? How can I defeat a dragon clan member like you? The sword master laughed and reminded her, but you're a fairy, aren't you? Yuzniel's expression turned cold as she retorted, I'm a half-fairy, so it's different. Bernard then advised her to brush off the snow from her clothes, warning her about the consequences if Seal saw her in such disarray. Just as he finished speaking, Mrs. Seal stepped out of the door, exclaiming, oh my, Yuzniel. She rushed over, worried about Yuzniel's well-being on her birthday. You're pushing yourself too hard today. Let me check if you're injured anywhere. Yuzniel smiled and reassured her, I'm fine, Mom. However, Mrs. Seal turned to Bernard and questioned him, aren't you being too strict with her? Bernard sighed and replied, Seal, have you forgotten that you asked me to teach her swordsmanship? Mrs. Seal didn't back down either, and the two of them began to argue fiercely. You're coddling her too much, Bernard accused, to which Mrs. Seal countered, Yuzniel is still a delicate child. Standing by, Yuzniel couldn't help but chuckle at their exchange. It reminded her of the time when she was younger and had first met Bernard, 10 years ago in the center of Varan. She had rushed to help an elderly woman who nearly slipped, saying, careful, ma'am. It was then that she heard someone sitting in a tree ask, who's that kid? Upon seeing the whole scene, Bernard had commented, quite nimble for a human. When he jumped down and saw Yuzniel's family, including her newborn sister, he was surprised. Seal, what are you doing here? Mrs. Seal was equally astonished. Is that you, Bernard? Since then, they had become acquainted, but their ongoing argument had only intensified. At 18, you're an adult. At 100, you're still a child. Caught in the middle, Yuzniel didn't know what to do and simply sighed, smiling. Ever since arriving in Varan, accepting reality had sometimes been difficult for her. In this freezing winter, she felt a sense of loss for not being able to find a way back to her previous life, and she carried guilt for her family's exile without reason. These emotions often overwhelmed her. Suddenly, she heard a voice calling, "Sister." It was Gail, her younger sister, joyfully holding a cake. "Dad and I baked this cake with strawberry jam." As time passed, the wounds healed gradually with each moment of happiness, and the hustle and bustle of life in the capital was slowly forgotten. Now, the three of them quickly squeezed into the cozy wooden house, enjoying the sweet cake together. Laughter filled the air as they exclaimed, "Wow, Gail, you're amazing." Just then, footsteps approached through the icy snow, towards their home. Yuzniel thought her life had become peaceful until she received that gift. Tesbelin appeared, holding the gift intended for Yuzniel. Inside the warm wooden house, Yuzniel sat before the cake made by her sister and father's own hands. She was deeply moved. Everyone began to sing the birthday song, congratulating her on her 18th birthday. Before everyone's well wishes, Yuzniel gratefully thanked them all. Her younger sister then handed her a small box, saying, "Sister, this is your gift." Yuzniel looked over at Bernard sitting quietly on the other side and asked in a subdued tone, "What about you? Don't you have a gift for me?" Bernard crossed his arms, coldly replying, "Gift? Each time you visit my humble abode, I play with your niece. Isn't that enough? Whenever she's upset and comes to me, I make you tea. Isn't that sufficient? You still want a gift?" Yuzniel's mother, sitting beside them, felt a twinge of jealousy. Looking at it now, I feel like my daughter is closer to Bernard than to me and her father. Yuzniel nodded, because I often stay with him, so I feel quite comfortable. Hearing her daughter's words, Yuzniel's mother sighed, "I feel so sad." Yuzniel helplessly smiled, "Didn't you say I learned swordsmanship from Uncle Bernard, and you said I had to be stronger now and spend more time studying?" Bernard's gaze softened as he chewed and said, "That's because of the prophecy." Yuzniel immediately gazed intently at Bernard and asked, "What is that?" She had never heard of it before, so she quickly inquired, "What prophecy?" Bernard nodded, "That's right. If you want to prepare to answer the prophecy, you have to be stronger now." Yuzniel's younger sister and father, alongside her, were also surprised. A prophecy? They had never heard of such a thing before. At this moment, Yuzniel's mother slammed her hand on the table in anger, shouting, "Bernard!" Her actions startled Bernard, who quickly wiped the sweat from his brow and apologized, "Oh, I'm sorry." The party continued, but there was a slight tension in the air. Yuzniel felt worried as she looked at her mother, because since meeting the emperor, this was the first time she had seen her mother so angry. Yuzniel pondered over Bernard's words, wondering, "Even though I don't know what it is, does that prophecy have anything to do with me?" As Yuzniel was lost in thought, suddenly someone spoke from behind her, saying, "Oh my, am I late?" Yuzniel's eyes turned towards the source of the voice, and immediately recognized it as they burst, who had come to wish her a happy birthday. At that moment, the atmosphere at the party became much lighter with Teacher Burst's arrival. Everyone was laughing and chatting happily, but Yuzniel's mother still harbored some resentment from earlier. She handed out tea, but deliberately skipped Bernard. "He doesn't deserve any," she muttered. Bernard protested loudly, "What's that? Why aren't you pouring me any tea?" Teacher Burst approached Yuzniel and handed her a gift prepared in advance. "Here's my gift for you," he said. It was a beautifully wrapped book, a book about magical fire. Teacher Burst hoped it would be helpful to Yuzniel. Yuzniel was surprised by the gift from her teacher and asked, "How did you know I was struggling with learning magical fire?" Teacher Burst smiled, "I noticed, because last time you had difficulty with ignition." Yuzniel was delighted. "Really?" She hugged the book tightly to her chest, her face filled with hope. Teacher Burst was the son of the old lady whom Yuzniel had helped before. He was also the only mage in Varan. It was sad that the old lady had passed away, but thanks to their acquaintance, he had become close to Yuzniel's family and taught her magic. Yuzniel sighed again, expressing her difficulty with learning fire magic. Teacher Burst chuckled softly, explaining that it was indeed challenging to create fire in such a cold environment and even more challenging to control it. He reassured her, "Yuzniel, in the next lesson, I'll teach you the secrets of control, so don't be too disheartened." "Yes." Yuzniel exclaimed with joy. Indeed, Burst is the most skilled magician among all the ones I've ever met. Yuzniel found his teachings to be even easier to understand than when she was studying in the capital. Upon hearing Yuzniel's words, Burst chuckled and sighed. "I'm not an official magician, and I don't even have a rank." At that moment, Yuzniel's expression darkened slightly. She felt a pang in her heart at the teacher's words, because magicians from the Northern Empire often undergo tests in the Mage Tower. Due to the hierarchical system, Yuzniel sometimes doubted Faye Burst's true identity. She could sense the magical energy and demeanor of Faye Burst were extraordinary. The teacher always seemed gentle and cheerful in a peculiar way, unlike anyone else here. Yuzniel thought, well, if my father doesn't know him, then he probably doesn't come from an important family. While Yuzniel was lost in thought, Faye Burst pulled out a gift from his robe and handed it to her, smiling. Here, take this, he said. Yuzniel held the gift in her hand, feeling a bit surprised, and asked, what is this? Is it a gemstone? Her eyes lit up when she saw the dazzling red gemstone. Oh, it's so beautiful, she exclaimed. The red light emitted by the gemstone attracted her gaze. Yuzniel couldn't take her eyes off the sparkling gemstone. She was amazed and asked, this is the first time I've seen such a large gemstone. What kind is it? It doesn't look like a ruby, does it? Faye Burst shook his head. I'm not sure either because it's not my gift, so I don't know what type of gemstone it is. Yuzniel was surprised. Then who gave it to me?